What happens when a Hollywood icon who never bends sits across from a host who never backs down? That's not a trailer line. That's exactly what happened the morning Jack Nicholson walked onto The View. On paper, it was supposed to be simple. Promote a new project, tell a few funny stories, let the audience laugh, roll to commercial. That's what the producers expected. That's what the network expected. But Jack didn't walk in like a man doing a PR stop. He walked in like a man looking for a fight. He slid into his chair at the table, still wearing those dark sunglasses he'd made famous for decades. He didn't rush. He didn't smile big for the camera. He just sat there for a beat, letting the silence hang in the air a little longer than anyone was comfortable with. Then, without a word, he reached up and slowly took off his glasses. He folded them carefully, placed them on the table in front of him, and looked straight down the line of hosts like he was sizing them up. "Let's hope this place can handle the truth today," he said. He didn't raise his voice. The line landed like a challenge. Whoopi's eyebrows went up just a little, the way they do when she knows something's about to go off the rails. Joy didn't say anything yet, but she didn't have to. The look she shot across the table said it for her. For the first few seconds, everyone tried to pretend it was normal. Whoopi did the polite intro, the kind every guest hears. "Jack Nicholson, everybody. Legend, 3-time Oscar winner, new film out now." Jack nodded, gave a small grin, but his eyes never really left Joy. Joy leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, studying him. She waited for her turn. Didn't interrupt, didn't jump in too early. She let Whoopi toss him the usual opening. "So, Jack, tell us about the new movie. What drew you to this role?" He answered. He dropped a small joke about getting older, another about still being able to remember his lines, and the table laughed. On the surface, it looked like any other interview, but underneath, the tension was already there. Joy was sitting forward now, eyes locked on him, fingers tapping lightly on the table. She wasn't listening to the plot of the movie. She was waiting for her moment, and then she took it. She leaned in, voice just a little sharper than it needed to be. 5 decades in Hollywood, Jack. Does the world still belong to men like you?" The whole tone of the segment shifted in one sentence. She could have asked about his career. She could have asked about favorite roles, old stories, and classic directors. But instead, she went straight for the pressure point. Age, power, gender, Hollywood politics, all packed into one line. Jack didn't flinch. He just looked at her, really looked at her, like he was finally interested. The corner of his mouth curled into that familiar half smile. Not friendly, not warm. "You want fireworks early today, huh?" he said. Joy didn't smile back. "That's a serious question," she replied, her tone flat. "You've been at the center of this business longer than some of us have been alive. Do you ever look around and think, this isn't my Hollywood anymore? Or do you still think the system should work the way it did when guys like you ran everything?" Jack leaned back in his chair, eyes still locked on hers. He nodded slowly. "I've never thought the world belonged to me," he said. "But I can tell you this. Every time I sit at a table like this, someone tries to tell me what kind of man I'm supposed to be. And it usually starts with a question like the one you just asked." Joy lifted her chin, not backing down. "And maybe that's because the world you came up in didn't exactly make room for a lot of people who didn't look like you," she shot back. "So yeah, I'm going to ask, do you miss that world? Or are you actually okay with the fact that it's changing?" He gave a short laugh, no humor in it. "You're not asking a question," Jack said calmly. "You're building a case." She blinked. "A case?" she repeated. "Yeah," he said. "You already decided what the verdict is. You just want me to walk into the confession." That line hit harder than a joke ever could. For a brief moment, nobody said anything. It was just the two of them, locked in, eyes never leaving each other. Joy could have backed off right there. She could have softened it, laughed it off, changed the subject. She didn't. "Jack," she said, "when you talk about Hollywood, you talk about courage and danger and art. But you never seem to talk about who was left out of that art. So yeah, I'm pressing you. That's my job. And this," he replied, "is mine." He tilted his head slightly, voice dropping just a little. "My job is to answer honestly, not to give you the line that makes your monologue sound noble." Joy's eyes narrowed. Trust me, she said. I don't need you to make me sound noble. He shrugged. Could have fooled me, he said. The temperature in the room had changed now. Joy leaned forward again. She didn't bother easing into the next question. She didn't soften her tone. She went straight for the accusation. No sugarcoating, no setup. So you miss the era, she said, her voice sharp, where men smoked cigars and women got 2 lines in the script? Jack raised his eyebrows, almost amused by how fast she escalated. He tilted his head slightly, studying her the way a boxer studies an opponent's stance. Joy, he said slowly, you don't debate. You translate what you wish I said. Joy's lips tightened, but Jack didn't give her time to respond. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on hers with the kind of focus that made even the cameras seem to pull back. You're not listening, he continued. You're waiting for a villain to attack. Joy's face flushed. A quick, involuntary reaction. The kind that happens when someone hits a nerve you didn't expect them to see. She tried to brush it off with a smirk, but it didn't land. Not this time. Oh, I'm listening, she shot back. I'm hearing a man who's uncomfortable with a Hollywood that doesn't orbit around him anymore. Jack smiled, slow, crooked, and sharper than anything he'd said so far. And maybe, he replied, you're uncomfortable with anyone who doesn't orbit around you. For a moment, the whole table went still. Sunny shifted in her chair, like she wasn't sure if she should jump in or stay out of it. Whoopi glanced between them, eyes wide, as if she knew this wasn't the kind of clash that could casually redirect into a commercial break. Joy didn't let the silence sit for long. She leaned in, eyes narrowed, her voice dropping into that pointed tone she saves for moments when she wants the whole room to hear every syllable. You know what this sounds like to me? She said. This sounds a lot like privilege talking, Jack. Jack didn't flinch. He pushed back from the table, stood halfway up, just enough to shift the energy, just enough to make every person at that table tense, then slowly lowered himself back into his chair. When he spoke, his voice was low, even, almost too calm. Joy, he said, don't weaponize words you barely understand. Joy's shoulders tightened. Whatever mask she had on slipped for half a second. Then came the snap. She slammed her hand down on the table, hard. Coffee cups rattled. Papers jumped. Even Whoopi jerked slightly in her chair. I amplify marginalized voices, Joy shouted. Don't you dare call that a weapon. Every head at the table turned toward her. She was breathing harder now, eyes locked on Jack like she was ready for round 3, round 4, however many rounds it was going to take. Jack didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He just leaned forward, elbows on the table, staring at her with that cold, steady intensity he's perfected over decades of playing men who don't bluff. Then he delivered the hardest line of the morning, clean, sharp, and fatal. You amplify voices, he said, pausing just long enough for everyone to lean in, as long as they sound like yours. The air left the room. Sunny froze mid-breath. Sarah's mouth actually fell open. Whoopi went completely still, and Joy didn't say a word. Sunny was the first one to move. She sat up a little straighter, lifted a hand, and tried to slip into the space between them before the table completely combusted. Okay, she said gently. Let's all just take a breath here. I think what Joy is trying to say... Jack didn't even let her finish. He turned his head, eyes still burning from the exchange, and cut her off with a calmness that somehow made the tension worse. Sunny, he said, you're trying to mediate a wildfire with a cup of water. Sunny blinked, caught somewhere between offended and speechless. She lowered her hand. Whatever she was about to say evaporated. Joy seized the moment. She wasn't cooling down. She straightened her posture, took a steadying breath, and went right back to the moral ground she knows better than anyone in daytime television. We're correcting decades of injustice, she said, each word clipped and firm. You call that uniformity? Jack didn't even hesitate. I call it pretending progress comes from silencing disagreement. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't come off angry. He sounded certain, steady, impossible to argue with unless you were ready to bring evidence, not attitude. Joy wasn't ready for that tone, not because she didn't understand it, because it hit closer than she expected. Joy leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowed, her voice steadier than before. She wasn't yelling now. She didn't need to. The softer tone made the words land even harder. Every time Hollywood shifts away from your comfort zone, she said, you cry integrity. Convenient. She said it so calmly that it almost sounded thoughtful. Jack listened without interrupting. No smirk, no laugh. Just his jaw working slightly, like he was deciding how sharp he wanted the next hit to be. Then he let out a low, humorless chuckle. Comfort, he said. Joy, I built my career making people uncomfortable. But Joy didn't back off. She leaned forward, her elbows on the table, her voice tightening into something more personal, more pointed. Yeah, she said, and maybe the act is getting old. The quiet tension didn't last long. Jack broke it himself. He leaned forward, both hands on the table, locking eyes with Joy like he was finally done with the slow dance. Go on, he said. Say it. Say what you've been hinting at for 10 minutes. His voice wasn't loud, but it hit harder than shouting. It was a dare. Clean, direct, and impossible to walk away from. Joy froze for a half second, not expecting him to call her out that bluntly. She opened her mouth. People like you. Jack didn't even give her a chance to finish. There, he cut in. You said it. Joy's face tightened. She knew she'd stepped exactly where he wanted her. She'd walked straight into the trap he'd been building since the first question. Her eyes flashed, part anger, part realization. But before she could recover, Jack went in harder than he had at any point so far. You know what the problem is, Joy, he said, his voice low and slicing. You don't want diversity. You want obedience dressed as virtue. The line landed like a meteor. Sonny's jaw literally dropped. Sarah looked like she forgot how to blink. Whoopi whispered something under her breath. Probably the closest thing daytime TV gets to, oh damn. Joy didn't move at first. She just stared at him, stunned, trying to process how directly he'd hit the very foundation of her argument. Then she snapped. She pushed her chair forward, leaning in so close the table mics picked up her breathing. And you don't want change, she fired back. You want your throne back. Jack has a slicing, dangerous smirk. I never needed a throne, he said quietly. You need an audience. Joy shot out of her chair so fast it scraped across the floor, the sound cutting through the studio like a blade. I'm done being lectured, she snapped, pointing at him, by someone who romanticizes the past. Her voice was loud, but it wasn't just volume. It was frustration overflowing. She wasn't debating anymore. She wasn't probing. She was fed up. Jack rose too, slow and steady, like he wanted to make sure every inch of the movement was seen. When he stood fully, he wasn't towering over her physically. He was towering over the moment. Calm, centered, and completely unshaken. And I'm done being psychoanalyzed, he said, by someone who treats disagreement as hostility. His tone wasn't angry. It was the exact opposite. Controlled, clear, deliberate. That calmness only made Joy angrier. You are hostile, Jack, she fired back immediately. You always have been. She leaned forward across the table, hands braced, breathing fast. Jack didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look bothered. He simply held her stare, his jaw set, his expression unreadable. Then he dropped the line that sealed the moment, quiet enough that the audience had to lean in, but sharp enough to slice the room in half. Hostile? He said. No, honest. And honesty terrifies you. Joy froze. The rest of the table sat motionless. Whoopi's eyes were darting between them like she was waiting for the next explosion. Sunny looked like she was trying not to breathe too loudly. Sarah's hands were literally clutching the edge of the table. And Joy looked like someone who had just been told the truth she spent years refusing to hear. This wasn't an argument anymore. This was impact. This was collision. This was the moment everything broke open and neither of them could pretend the conversation was still about Hollywood or movies or representation. They weren't fighting about the industry. They were fighting about each other. And just like that, the showdown hit its peak. The kind of peak that doesn't raise the volume but drops it because the words are heavy enough on their own. One more line like that and the whole table might have cracked. Joy didn't stay frozen for long. The silence lingered, thick and heavy, before she finally took a slow step back from the table. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice wasn't loud anymore. It was tight, controlled, almost too controlled. Maybe I shouldn't have expected a real conversation today. It was a small sentence, but the bitterness inside it was unmistakable. Not fiery like before. Worse. It sounded like resignation mixed with frustration, like she'd reached the limit of what she was willing to fight for on camera. Jack stayed standing, watching her with that same unreadable expression. He turned as if he were about to walk off the set, maybe even end the segment himself, but halfway through the movement, he stopped. Then he slowly looked back at her. "Conversation requires listening," he said. "Today, all you wanted was victory." The words weren't thrown. They were placed, carefully, deliberately, like he wanted them to sit with her long after he walked away. Joy pressed her lips together. She didn't argue. She didn't fire back. She didn't even try to spin it. Because Jack wasn't making a point anymore. He was delivering a verdict. He stepped away from the table, turning toward the edge of the stage. His face was calm, almost too calm for the chaos that had just unfolded. And just before he left the frame, he threw out the final line of the segment, quiet, sharp, and devastating. Hollywood lost its courage, and clearly, so did this table. No one moved. No one spoke. Not Joy, not Sunny, not Sarah, not even Whoopi. The cameras caught the stillness, the tension, the way the hosts stared after him like the air had been knocked out of the room. The echo of Jack's final words lingered like smoke long after the screen faded. "Before you go, tell me this. Who was right, Jack or Joy?" Drop your take in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and share this video with someone who loves a good showdown. Because if today proved anything, it's that daytime TV isn't ready for legends who refuse to play by the rules. Stay tuned. There's always another clash coming.